It's Mock Draft Monday, and let's just say Chip Kelly would be proud of this one.
You are Locked On Eagles, your daily Philadelphia Eagles podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thanks so much for making Locked On Eagles your first listen each and every day, and thanks for making the Locked On Podcast Network the #1 sports podcast network. I'm your host, Louis DiBiase. Welcome into the first Mock Draft Monday of the 2026 offseason. If you haven't been listening and watching Locked On Eagles for the past, we've done 8 off seasons on this show with myself and formerly Gino Camilleri running all of our draft content. First of all, welcome in. Thanks for making Locked On Eagles your first listen Monday through Friday right here on the Locked On Podcast Network. And if you haven't been a part of our offseason content, every Monday starts with a 7-round Philadelphia Eagles mock draft. And the Eagles still have plenty of work to do before the 2026 NFL draft, free agency with in-house decisions, who to sign in the UFA pool. Maybe there's trades before the draft as well. A lot of work to do, but the draft is the most important part of the offseason for the Eagles and for every team. When you look at who made the Super Bowl this weekend, the Seattle Seahawks, the New England Patriots, especially Seattle, look at all the homegrown talent that they've drafted on both sides of the football. So the draft is so important, and the Eagles have a lot of draft picks to stockpile this roster with young, inexpensive talent, which especially on the offensive side of the football is really, really important. Howie Roseman mentioned that specifically in his end-of-the-year press conference a couple weeks ago. And I do want to say that was the theme of this first Mock Draft Monday, was all about replenishing the offense with young, long-term talent to eventually replace A.J. Brown, eventually replace Dallas Goedert, and eventually could mean this year. Or if not this year, I don't think A.J. Brown is an Eagle for another, 3 to 4 seasons. I don't think Saquon Barkley is an Eagle for another 3 to 5 years. Dallas Goedert, I think, is likely on the way out this offseason. If Lane Johnson doesn't retire this year, I think it's very likely that he retires in 2027. So when I did this mock draft, the first one of this offseason, my approach really was about the offense, because I think the last couple years, Howie Roseman has taken time and he has used legitimate assets and put them into the defense, right? Because the offense, he hit on a lot of draft picks and he paid all those guys, so he had to get younger and cheaper on defense. So he went with, Jalen Carter and Jordan Davis and Nolan Smith and Jalix Hunt, Quinyon Mitchell, Cooper DeJean, Jahad Campbell, Drew Makuba. He nailed a lot of those picks. All right, those guys got to get paid. So now we need to get younger and cheaper on offense as those guys start to age out of their prime, or maybe just price themselves out of Philly. So let's start this mock draft off with an offensive pick with the 23rd overall selection. And I only made one trade in this draft because I did want to, with the first mock draft, just kind of take a look at what talent could be around the current Eagles picks. And this pick is maybe my favorite so far early on in the offseason process. When I see mock drafts out there, who's my favorite prospect to go to the Eagles in round 1? It's Oregon tight end Kenyon Sadiq. And yes, that's why at the start of this episode, I did say Chip Kelly would be proud of this draft. Kenyon Sadiq is exactly what the Eagles are looking for in a long-term Dallas Goedert replacement. Kenyon Sadiq is a complete receiving tight end. Is he an elite, world-breaking, otherworldly blocking tight end? No, but Kenyon Sadiq is such a complete receiver, strong hands, strong run after the catch ability. You can line him up as an inline tight end. You can put him as a wide receiver. You can use different creative play calls to get him the ball in space. I think he could have the impact year 1. He could have the same impact that Harold Fannin had for the Cleveland Browns in 2025 for the Philadelphia Eagles. And when you talk about run after the catch opportunities, yards after the catch, that's something the Eagles have been so bad at creating over the last couple years. They were dead last this year in yards after the catch in the passing game. I think Kenyon Sadiq could be an instrumental part of turning that around. And if you lose Dallas Goedert, that's a big loss. Dallas Goedert was your best red zone weapon this year, especially with the death of the tush push. I mean, he had 13 touchdowns when you combine the regular season and the playoffs, and I believe 11 of them were in the red zone. So you got to replace that. You got to replace his versatility as a deep threat at tight end, as a yak weapon, as a blocker, and I do think that is Sadiq. You might have to trade up a little bit from 23 to get him because he is the top tight end on the open market, but at 23, I think there's a good chance that he is in that range of picks. Like I think he could slip outside the top 20. Maybe you make a small trade up for him, but he was available on the board at 23, and I ran to the podium to get him. I think when you look at the NFL right now and the way defenses are adjusting to the deep ball, it's the cover two era, right? A lot of defenses are trying to emulate what Vic Fangio has done over the years schematically. I think running the football and getting tight ends involved in the passing game is really important, and Sadiq is your modern day hybrid versatile tight end. Again, he is not going to be a top 5 blocking tight end in football, but it doesn't matter when you look at the production in the passing game, when you look at the complete skill set. I think pairing him up with Jalen Hurts would really help inject some life into this offense. They need some dogs that break tackles, that bring on contact and play with life. And that to me is Kenyon Sadiq. So he was my first pick at 23 overall. And the reason, again, I said early on to start the show that Chip Kelly would be proud of this draft, I went back-to-back Oregon Ducks with my first 2 picks. And shout out to my former co-host, Gino Camilleri, if you're watching this, an Oregon Ducks fan. I'm sure he would love this mock draft as well. I went with Lane Johnson's heir apparent here at 55 in the second round. I moved down a couple spots, picked up a 4th-round pick in 2027, continue to stockpile Howie Roseman's war chest with draft picks, and I went with Oregon offensive tackle Isaiah World, who was a left tackle throughout his time with the Ducks, but I do think he shows the athleticism, the versatility to play maybe inside and out, guard and tackle, and I think he could play both left tackle and right tackle. This is a guy that has all the traits you want. He might be a little more raw than some other tackle prospects, and I think that's why he'll slip to day 2 in the second round, but when you look at the height, the length, the athleticism, the movement skills with his feet, the ability to anchor, the strength. I think his hand placement definitely needs to grow. I think at times he struggles with certain kinds of pass rushers that are really technically sound. But Isaiah World, I think, could come in right away, maybe be a Mekhi Becton-like option at right guard to compete with Tyler Steen this year. And then when Lane Johnson retires, you can kick him out to the outside at right tackle. I think it's a necessity with one of your first 2 picks. One of those first 2 picks has to be a player that could be a long-term offensive tackle starter for you. I think this is the year to invest in that spot. And Isaiah World was somebody that I really liked, and I thought I could get in a couple spots if I moved down from 53 to 55, collect an extra 4th-round pick in 2027, which I can maybe then use to move up with some other picks. So I went with 2 Oregon Ducks to start off this mock draft. Kenyon Sadiq at tight end at pick 23, and then Isaiah World at pick 55. My first pick in round 3, I was a big fan of this one. And again, the theme of this draft is replenishing the weaponry of this offense for Jalen Hurts. They need, one of the big lessons from title weekend was that the Eagles need easier yards in the passing game on first and second down. They need players that can create. Not saying they don't have that they didn't have that last year. A lot of that is up to the scheme, the play caller, and the coach. But I do think when you look at A.J. Brown as he ages, not the most explosive run-after-the-catch player anymore. Devontae Smith, he's never been a top-tier run-after-the-catch player. Dallas Goedert and Saquon Barkley are great in that area, but Saquon's getting older. Dallas Goedert's probably going to be gone next season. Give me somebody like Indiana wide receiver Omar Cooper Jr. And again, I think he needs to polish his game as a route runner. Not the tallest receiver in the world. I don't think he's going to run a 4.3 40 at the combine next month. But he kind of gives me like His ceiling, is his floor maybe a Malachi Corley? Sure. But I think his ceiling could be like one of these just bigger slot, technically sound, run after the catch weapons that you can scheme open plays for. You look at a prime Deebo Samuel, I could see that being Omar Cooper, but I think he's a little bit more explosive than that, and he just runs downhill really hard, kind of like a running back, a physical player, makes tough catches in contested situations for Mendoza, a national champion. He knows how to win. I think you could put him in the slot right away, and he would complement Devontae Smith really well, and hopefully A.J. Brown if he's here. And I, again, did this mock draft with the assumption that Dallas Goedert's going to be gone, and I think there's a good chance A.J. could be too. So with your first 3 picks, you got to bring in at least one pass catcher. Even if A.J.'s back for one more year, I don't think he's here for 2 to 3 more seasons. So you got to bring in a couple pass catchers to me, and Omar Cooper fits the bill of what this football team needs at wide receiver and just in the offensive weaponry in general. All right, guys, we'll continue Mock Draft Monday coming up next. I still got another 3rd round pick and then rounds 4 through 7. Today's episode of the Locked On Eagles podcast, we are brought to you by PrizePicks. The big game is almost here, 2 more weeks away, and there's no better way to stay locked into every moment than with PrizePicks, the daily fantasy app where it always feels good to be right. With football season coming down to its final stretch, now's the perfect time to close it out strong. PrizePicks makes watching the game even more exciting by letting you build simple lineups around player projections, no drafts, no waiting, just football action all the way through the playoffs. PrizePicks is incredibly easy to get started. Pick 2 or more players and choose more or less on their projections. Make watching a game way more engaging, especially during the playoffs and the big game. Download the PrizePicks app today. Use our code LOCKEDONNFL in all capital letters. That's LOCKEDON NFL to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. That's code LOCKEDONNFL for $50 in lineups after your first $5 lineup. PrizePicks. It's good to be right. Today's show is also sponsored by Robinhood. What if sports were traded like markets? Now you can put your sports IQ to work in real time with Robinhood prediction markets. It's not you against the house, it's you participating in a live market. You can buy or sell your positions live all game long. Use your sports knowledge in the moments that matter. Robinhood prediction markets change the game. It's people moving the action, so when momentum shifts, you can move with it. I always knew the game, but never had a dynamic way to apply that knowledge. Now I can actually take part live in a market powered by people. You're no longer just a spectator. Play-by-play, you decide. Trade every play with Robinhood, now available across the U.S. Download the Robinhood app now to begin. Futures and cleared swaps trading involves significant risk and is not appropriate for everybody. Event contracts are offered by Robinhood Derivative LLC, a registered futures commission, merchant, and swap firm. Thanks so much for making Locked On Eagles your first listen each and every day. Guys, if you haven't subscribed already, we're doing awesome things at the Locked On Podcast Everydayer Club. Head over to lockedoneagles.supercast.com or lockedonpodcast.com/everydayer. Go check out our 2 plans. $5 a month. You're going to get Locked On Eagles ad-free. You're going to become a member of our Discord channel with all Eagles fans and all Locked On podcast hosts to talk about the Birds, to talk about the NFC East, the draft, free agency. On game days, all of us are in the Discord talking about football. You'll also get a Locked On merch store for some swag. $15 a month gets you the All Access Pass. So on top of all of those things you get for $5 a month, you're also going to get exclusive episodes like the guest pass I did on Friday with Eagles podcast legend John Barchard. I'm going to do some film study this offseason. Just a bunch of different podcasts for you. We're going to do some what ifs. That's a whole lot of fun. You could do one-on-one texting with me as well with any Eagles questions you have, a newsletter after each episode. So again, if you're interested in either plan, head over to lockedonpodcast.com/everydayer or lockedoneagles.supercast.com. Let's continue Mock Draft Monday, the first one of the 2026 offseason. The first 3 picks in rounds 1 through 3. At pick 23, I went with Oregon tight end Kenyon Sadiq. I went with another Oregon Duck at pick 55, traded down a couple spots, collected a future 4th-round pick in 2027, and then I took offensive tackle from Oregon, Isaiah World. Then I took another run-after-the-catch weapon from Indiana, wide receiver Omar Cooper Jr. So 3 offensive picks in a row, 2 pass catchers. I think there's a really good chance Dallas Goedert is gone this year and that A.J. Brown and Lane Johnson are no longer with this football team after maybe one more season. There's a chance that they could both be gone this year as well. So we're getting to a point where that second phase of Jalen Hurts' career, kind of like Pat Mahomes in a way, and this is just the reality of when you have a franchise quarterback that plays for, 7+ years, maybe a decade. Eventually you see change around him, right? The DNA, the blueprint of the roster changes, right? And I think you're seeing, okay, they built around rookie contract Jalen Hurts with all this expensive star talent on offense that they drafted, they traded for, they nailed those picks, those moves, then paid those guys. Well, okay, now Jalen Hurts is more expensive. Those offensive guys are getting older. The defense is getting into their prime. We got to pay all those studs. Now you got to draft well on offense again. You got to hit on those picks. They're going to need rack weapons. They're going to need a new tight end. And even if A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith are back, and even Dallas Goedert, I would like to have, I want one of those explosive kind of gadgety weapons for a new play caller that I was really hoping Quez Watkins could become. And even though Quez didn't get there, I do think his elite speed did create a lot of good spacing for this Eagles offense in 2021, 2022, and even to a degree at times the first half of 2023. So that was kind of, and Omar Cooper Jr., that pick, he's not a Quez Watkins speed type, but again, he's somebody you can scheme up in the screen game, really tough hands over the middle of the field. That's what I'm looking for with the Kenyon Sadiq pick, with the Omar Cooper Jr. pick. And again, Lane Johnson, he's got a year or 2 left. You got to bring in some prospects that can replace him. And I think Isaiah World is a really traitsy player that I think Jeff Stoutland could turn into a stud. Let's continue on, though, with round 3. I have another pick here at 98. Finally taking somebody on defense. The biggest need on defense is replacing likely Jalen Phillips, who I do think is going to leave in free agency. Give me UCF edge rusher Malachi Lawrence. This is a really explosive player, a really explosive first step off the line of scrimmage, a bendy player, good closing speed to get to the quarterback, a pass rushing specialist. I think he's got good length as well. A smaller frame, I would say, I don't think he's your classic 4'3", hand in the dirt defensive end. I think he's got a similar style to, Nolan Smith, to Jalix Hunt, but I like that kind of explosive player. I think that's what Vic Fangio is looking for in his edge rushers. I think he wants versatility, guys that can drop back and play well in space as well. And I think Lawrence is a raw player, but kind of like Jalix Hunt in 2024, give me another traitsy guy for Fangio to develop. He's got a pretty good track record of it. Clint Hurt as well. Give me this kind of guy out of UCF in round 3 at pick 98. Finally going with defense. I do think maybe the best thing about this year's draft class are the defensive linemen. And I think that was kind of the opposite. Over the last few years, I would say the pass rushing talent, like the first round last year was great, but there's been a drop-off. It hasn't been as deep over the last few years. I don't think that's the case for the 2026 class. And then I went with another defensive player here at pick 122. I went with Penn State safety, Zakee Wheatley. I do think when you look at the Eagles safety position, Reed Blankenship's a UFA. Don't know if he's going to be back. I really like Drew Makuba. I think he can break out in year 2. Thought he showed a lot of positive signs as a rookie, a playmaker with a couple big interceptions. Really started to come into his own before he got injured. But that's the big thing with Makuba is, can he stay healthy? That was the concern and why he dropped to the bottom of the second round coming out of Texas, is that frame. I think they could get deeper at safety. Marcus Epps is a free agent too. Thought he filled in really well this year for Makuba, but is he back? Sidney Brown cannot be trusted on the defensive side of the football. I like him as a gunner, kind of like Keely Ringo, but I think they could use another potential playmaking safety, and I think that could be Wheatley out of Penn State. I think Vic Fangio has a really good track record of developing safeties. And I think Wheatley, you look at his ball skills, you look at his range. I actually noticed him a few times when I was studying Kevin Winston Jr. tape last year. And he's an interesting prospect that I think in that late third round, fourth round range is somebody that I think would excite the Eagles, and he'll be at the Senior Bowl this week, so I'm excited when I head down to Mobile to watch Wheatley. So went with a safety there on day 3. Another pick here for day 3 at 151, Ole Miss defensive tackle Zakavian Harris. I think Moro Ujoma, this might be his last year with the Eagles. Continue to develop and draft, invest in pass rushing interior linemen that can take advantage of playing next to Jalen Carter. I noticed Harris a lot in the college football playoff. I do think he's a really interesting prospect with good length, power, and a good bull rush to get to the quarterback. Harris is an interesting prospect on day 3. And that's, again, when you're talking about day 3 picks, a lot of it has to do with traits. Let's go for starters. Long-term upside, that to me is Wheatley. That to me is Harris. I think that was a similar theme with my pick at 137. Harris was 151. Before that, I even went with an Alabama corner, Domani Jackson, who is a traitsy, raw player, definitely a grabby guy in space that I think early on could be a liability with pass interference calls, but I really like his movement skills, his ability to mirror wide receivers, good length. I'm going with traits here on day 3. And it's all about defense. I went with a safety, an edge rusher, a defensive tackle, a corner, and then I wrap things up with my guy, a quarterback. I think there's a good chance the Eagles could trade Tanner McKee this offseason. Sam Howell is a UFA. I'd like to bring one of those guys back in this quarterback room to be QB2, but how about somebody like Arkansas quarterback Taylon Green at 179 that excels in an RPO-style offense that's tall, really good downhill speed. I think he would be a perfect Jalen Hurts understudy, a strong arm, a whippy throwing motion. He can throw from different angles. Now, he plays hero ball way too much. I think his accuracy is up and down, forces throws at times, and just tries to do too much. He needs to be more efficient and I think take what a defense gives you. But he's kind of like the Joe Milton of this class for me, where it's just give me that ball of clay to invest in, kind of like with Tanner McKee, and then maybe he's the future. Maybe you flip him for another pick down the road like you did with Kenny Pickett, with Tanner McKee, potentially now somebody like Taylon Green. He'll also be at the Senior Bowl this week. Go watch his highlights. He is a really fascinating prospect to watch, and I think this is the time of year, or just the time in the cycle of the Eagles quarterback room with the unknown of Howell and McKee's future, where you do bring in somebody in this year's draft class. All right, guys, we will wrap up this Monday edition of Locked On Eagles. Coming up next, let's flip the script from Mock Draft Monday to Title Weekend, a lesson or a few that we can learn from what we saw in Seahawks-Rams and then Patriots-Broncos. That's coming up next right here on Locked On Eagles. Today's episode of the Locked On Eagles podcast is brought to you by Indeed. If you've ever hired somebody who looked good on paper but wasn't the right fit, you know how important that is. When you want candidates who truly match what you're looking for, trust Indeed's sponsored jobs. Hiring Indeed is all you need. Stop struggling to get your job posts seen on other sites. Indeed sponsored jobs put your post on the top of the page and help you reach the right candidates faster. If I needed to hire somebody for Locked On Eagles, I'd go straight to Indeed and be very specific about what I need. Real experience, not just a resume buzzword. Instead of struggling to get your job post seen, Indeed sponsored jobs helps your listing stand out and reach quality candidates faster. According to Indeed data, sponsored job posting directly on Indeed are 90% more likely to report a hire than non-sponsored jobs. Spend more time interviewing candidates who check all your boxes with less stress, less time, and more results using Indeed sponsored jobs. Listeners of this show get a $75 sponsored job credit to help give your job the premium placement it deserves at Indeed.com/LockedOnNFL. Just go to Indeed.com/LockedOnNFL right now and support the show by saying you heard about Indeed on this podcast. Terms and conditions apply. Hiring? Do it the right way with Indeed. All right, wrapping up this Monday edition of the Locked On Eagles podcast. Let me know what you thought of my first mock draft right here on Mock Draft Monday. Just to kind of recap real quick, at pick 23, Oregon tight end Kenyon Sadiq. At 55 in round 2, Oregon offensive tackle Isaiah World. Round 3, Indiana wide receiver Omar Cooper Jr. and UCF edge rusher Malachi Lawrence. Day 3, I went with a Penn State safety Zakee Wheatley, Ole Miss defensive tackle Xavier Harris, Alabama cornerback Damani Jackson, and then Arkansas quarterback Talon Green. Hit us up on X at LockedOnBirds or at DiBiase LOE and let me know how I did on my first mock draft of the 2026 offseason. This also was the first podcast since conference championship weekend concluded, and man, what a game. Seahawks-Rams was unbelievable. Can't say the same about Patriots-Broncos, but there were some lessons I think you could take away from those games as an Eagles fan, and the biggest one lines up directly with the theme of this mock draft, and it's that this Eagles team next year, I don't know who the play caller is going to be. I don't know if Nick Sirianni is going to have his hands on this offense still, or if somebody's going to have full autonomy, if, Brian Dable changed his mind and wanted to be the offensive coordinator and play caller for Jalen Hurts. But regardless of what the situation is, the approach has to be next year, we need to give Jalen Hurts more layups, more easy completions on first and second down. And I hate to beat a dead horse with this. I've said it a lot on this podcast, but watching specifically that Rams-Seahawks game, watching how both teams were so efficient on first and second down. And yeah, like you look at the Seahawks, the way they ran the football with Kenneth Walker, obviously the Eagles just need their offensive line to get healthier and to get more consistent so Saquon Barkley can dominate again like you did in 2024 so they can get back to being an efficient run team. Like that's the number one priority. But the number two priority should be, like, look at what the Rams do in the quick passing game. Look at what Clint Kubiak did for Sam Darnold today. Scheming open JSN, Cooper Kupp, Rashid Shaheed, even their tight ends that are not nearly the talent of a Dallas Goedert this year. The amount of times they were in, like, 2nd and 4, 3rd and 2, because, hey, the cornerback's playing 10 yards off the ball. Here's just a quick throw to JSN, or the way they put him in the backfield and had him run this like in and out, and it perfectly blended, it married in with the route of Cooper Kupp, who ran kind of an underneath to pull down the defensive backs, and that lined up with what, I don't know, everything was just so in sync, and things were easy, and they took what the defense gave them, these quick throws over the middle of the field, the spacing, the pre-snap motion. The Eagles were just so bad with motion last year, with the screen game, with throws over the middle of the field, getting their players, their elite weapons in space, and having success on first and second down, even when you weren't running the ball well. That was not the case this year. They were always playing from behind the sticks. On second down, they would run the ball on these second and long situations, and then it was always 3rd and 7+, and look, I don't know if Jalen Hurts is going to grow more in his career. No matter what, though, I think they're always going to be a team that's not really built for 3rd and 7+. So you have to be so much more efficient on early downs, and that was something that the Rams and Seahawks were so good at today, or I should say on Sunday night, and that's why that game was a shootout. The Eagles need that. Whoever is the play caller, more layups for Jalen Hurts, make things easier on a quarterback, especially when your quarterback isn't the most consistent pocket passer. He is by far definitely not the worst pocket passer in football and has a lot of elite moments inside the pocket, but Jalen is an up and down guy in there, and I think that they need a coach that makes it easy for him, just schemes open easy gimme games. Watching the NFC title today brought me back to the Eagles NFC title last year, and when you watch that tape, they did a really good job of just Jalen rolling to his right real quick. A.J. Brown has a corner playing 10 yards off the ball. Here's a 7-yard comeback route. Boom. Hit him. 2nd and 3. 2nd and 2. They need more of that, and I thought that was very apparent today. The other thing is that Mike Vrabel is such an unbelievable game-managing coach. Like, his awareness of the play clock and when to use timeouts and just situational awareness of like when to go for it and understanding his opponent. I think when you're not a play caller as a head coach on offense or defense, you really need to be elite in the areas like Mike Vrabel was today against the Broncos. And I need more from Nick Sirianni in that department next year. I do think Nick has some good moments as a game manager, but I think it's too inconsistent for a guy that this year might not have control of the offense or defense. And looking at what Vrabel did today, I think the Eagles need to be better in that department next year as well. So I don't know. For me, the personnel's just got to be better at executing next year, but a lot of it was just how well these teams are so buttoned up and how disciplined they are and how well coached they are. The Patriots, again, it's just an easy path, and it's so frustrating to see them get back to a Super Bowl. Finally, we don't have the Chiefs in the big game, and now we have New England back in it. Life is just unfair, and man, it must suck to be a Jets fan with Darnold in, and the Patriots in, or the Bills watching Darnold and the Pats get in before Josh Allen, the Vikings letting Darnold go. The Eagles, we don't have to feel that because Jalen Hurts got us one again last year in 2024. But there are lessons that the Eagles could, and I think the Eagles on paper were a better team than a lot of these teams in the postseason, and they really screwed a good chance of repeating as Super Bowl champs this year. But I do think these teams are ahead of the Eagles in certain ways, and I think there were lessons that they could take from these games for sure. All right, guys, that's going to do it for today's edition of the Locked On Eagles podcast. Thanks so much for making us your first listen each and every day. Until tomorrow, thanks so much for downloading, watching, and listening, and let's go Birds. Fly, Eagles, fly.